So here is somewhere which only seems to have new people, no persistent occupation of space. Here is somebody who's been around for an awful long time, yeah? And here is somewhere that has quite a bit of persistence taking place, of either people being there continuously or people being there and then reappearing and occupying space over time. These are urban spaces, by the way. And you can see that these have particular time structures which, as you magnify them, you're basically getting to see weekday and weekend blips and day-night kind of events through these things. Now this is an interesting thing because you've got a structure there where you're capturing presence of people in space. You're able to begin to construct a network, actually. A network that says this person here was spotted there and then they were spotted there at some time later. Yeah? They happen to be co-present in space with anybody that was vertically with them at the same time. So, you know, there's people who are in the same space at the same time are co-present. And so you can construct a little co-presence temporal network, or a large co-presence temporal network, that shows that over a long period, about 18 months in the city of Bath, most people are members of a single structured network. They all walk together at some time. There's a group of people here who are outliers, you know, little groups of people actually, who never linked to anything else. And they're probably the Japanese tourists that came in, were around for a while and then gone. Yeah? Now, given a social network like that, a time-directed social network, you can do some interesting things like say, well, what happens if we try to propagate information through this social network? Let's start off at this time, and let's not simulate how people are interacting. Let's actually emulate it, because we know this is a real network. It's not a simulated network, it's a genuinely constructed real one. It's not a small world, it's something else. Yeah? You throw in an event, and you ask, well, what happens in terms of how that's transmitted through the group of people that are there after you, because it's temporal. One of the things that you find here is that as you remove strong network members, you get different structures, if you like, in the epidemiology of the graph. Let's actually just look at this one. It turns out that the briefest of encounters are the most important in holding this network together. So very short encounters are absolutely fundamental in holding everything together. If you eliminate the short encounters, then an epidemic of information, if you like, dies off after a time, after 100 days. If you don't eliminate it, you get this resurgence of the epidemic sometime later. So if you think about viruses, that's how it happens. You get a major peak in the virus and everybody gets infected, but then there's a group of people who are not infected who then get infected later, and you get these cycles. Yeah? You get that if you've got briefest encounters in this temporal network, but not if you've got, if you eliminate those. So there's some quite interesting effects in here. You can imagine this as being viruses, you can also imagine it as being ideas and concepts moving around a community of people. Let's take another couple of games that we played over the years. One was to try and develop a virtual environment which could capture the resources that a research group might be interested in working with, and would then create a landscape in which little avatars could give you awareness of what you were doing and where you were playing, if you like, in that environment. By spatializing the landscape of information resources and growing it as a little sort of urban aggregation simulation, the idea was that you would make something that effectively became intelligible for those who were trying to find particular resources. It was how could you make the virtual world real for the purposes of allowing people to search for others who were interested in things they were interested in, and also to search for resources associated with those. We're going to skip that. Oh. Go on to work that actually is, who's from Nottingham? Holder in Nottingham did some work on this. It's an area, it's what's called mixed reality interface. Webcam sits up here, projector there, projecting a virtual environment in which you've got mobile cells, camera there, Holger in Nottingham there, what Holger sees of us here, somebody else somewhere else, yeah, map of the virtual world. Oops, sorry. So this is the research lab that we're just about to move out of over in Torrington Place. And it's an always-on system. Voice, vision, able to construct remote connections between different cells in different locations. Yeah. Since I've moved from this building into another building, I've got a similar sort of node to this thing there in the office that I'm now sitting in. Yeah? So it's how do you use the virtual world to mediate between a series of real physical spaces in such a way that you can reconfigure the virtual world, that's flexible and costs nothing, to create windows from one place to another between real physical spaces which are immobile. So just to wind up, some thoughts. Well, Karl Popper, in his sort of hypothetico-deductive view of science, says what comes first is a theory and a hypothesis, and then what you do is you go and you test that to destruction. You try to falsify your theory by throwing it into an experiment, into a relationship with the real world, where the real world bites back at your theory. And what you do is you do your damnedest to demolish your own theory. Thomas Kuhn, of course, says the real world isn't quite like that, that quite often when you actually look at the history of science and the behaviour of scientists, they spend an awful lot of time defending their pet theory against the opposition of others who would try and demolish it for them. And quite often they close their minds to new ideas. And that's why you get scientific revolutions, which is when the base of evidence stacks up, the old guard disappear, and it's always the young new guard who come in and take over. Now, of course, there's elements of truth in both of these sides of the story. Is Ian Hacking who came along and said, as a physicist and a statistician, he said, actually, there's something that all these guys have forgotten, and that's the vital role of the experiment. That in theoretical physics in particular, the theoreticians think they're God, yes, and they invent an idea, let's explain the world according to, it's got the Higgs boson or whatever. It's a purely theoretical entity, and they say that, they call on Popper and they say, what we're going to do is we're going to construct this massive great collider, and we're going to bang particles off each other at increasing energies, and we will find the Higgs boson. He says, actually, what's really interesting is when you don't find the Higgs boson, but you find something else. Because that's the phenomenon, the creation of a phenomenon, which then sets the theoreticians a real task to work on. And he said, you've got to remember, creating phenomena by themselves is actually a vital part of science. Now, I think we do that all the time. What we do when we make new ways of representing data sets or new ways of looking at things, or when, as architects, we design new buildings, one of the things we're doing is testing a theoretical proposition. Saying, what if the latest research space looked like this? That's a theoretical move. And it's one that you then build and construct, and you find, goodness me, it was a bad idea, or goodness me, it works wonderfully, and it advances our theory through the way we practice. So, let's just sort of go back to the person with our theories. The theories inform engineering practice. A lot of engineering practice is about optimization towards a particularly known objective.